Welcome to Some Room to Grow. My name's Greg. We are now on to episode 3 in this series on starting a food forest. This time we'll be focusing on sunlight and location. You can find links to the other episodes in this series below the video. This information can apply to any type of gardening, so I will be including the entire garden area to help illustrate some of those details. But most of it will be centered on the food forest and how sunlight and location improves the overall health and food production of this ecosystem. And I will also be talking about how we plan to get more sunlight back here and how that will allow us to eventually expand this whole garden area. Since the food forest is all about food production, go figure, then all of the things growing in it typically need about 8 hours of direct sunlight each day. This is for fruit trees, nut trees, berry bushes, wildflowers, herbs, and perennial vegetables. And 8 hours is commonly indicated as full sun when you see it on a seed packet or a plant that you buy at the nursery. And ideally, this sun should be in the morning because it's typically hotter in the afternoon and some shade is okay. So, for example, how much sun does our garden receive? Well, currently it's not quite enough. We get by with it, but we could really use more. We chose this spot when we bought the house because it was the sunniest part of the yard, and now we're starting to expand north from that. We're in Zone 5B in the Midwestern US, and this is our backyard at 9 a.m. on June 11th. There's some filtered light coming through the tree in our front yard, and direct sunlight is just about to start hitting the garden. Here it is half an hour later when the food forest is in full sun. By 10 a.m. the whole garden is out of the shade. At noon, this peach tree is already losing sun. The food forest is in filtered shade by 1:30, and finally the rest of the garden by 3 p.m. So overall, it's not the best for getting high yields of fruit and veggies. So this brings up an interesting point, and that is that the entire garden does not receive the same amount of direct sunlight throughout the day. And it's not just because of where things are planted, but it has to do with the angle of the light as the sun tracks through the sky. When it's early in the morning, the sun is close to the horizon, the shadows from the house and the front yard tree are stretched way out over this area. But then as the sun gets closer to its peak, these shadows quickly recede. So the easternmost part of the garden quickly catches up with the rest as those shadows become shorter. But the rate of shadow movement slows down when the sun is near its peak. If we take a look at these images again, we can see it takes only 1 hour to go from shade to full sun in the morning, but to go from sun to shade in the early afternoon, it takes 3 times as long. So you can see that the east end of the garden receives 2 more hours of direct sunlight each day compared to the west end. I wanted to point this out because I think it's something you should definitely pay attention to if you have taller buildings or trees that are casting shade over your garden area or potential garden area through any part of the day. The angle of the sun will change throughout the year, of course, as the Earth revolves around the sun. I found a great website called suncalc.org where you can learn a lot about the sun's position in the sky throughout the year. I found it to be quite useful when I was researching for this video. So how can we get more sunlight back here? Well, the most obvious and also the most difficult answer would be to remove one or both of these trees. And I know I've talked about this in my other videos, and I want to make it very clear that I don't take this idea lightly. My wife and I both feel pretty strongly against cutting down trees. But there are some times where it becomes kind of necessary to do so. And I want to show you why I think that this is one of those situations. These are both silver maples, which are notorious for requiring a lot of maintenance when used as a landscaping tree. Birds make home in the branches, which quickly decay from the inside, the whole branch dies, and the tree falls apart branch by branch. This quick decaying aspect is what makes this particular species a poor choice for a shade tree. So this is the bigger tree closest to the deck and the house. The birds were hollowing out this branch from the inside, so that was already dying, and so my neighbor came and helped me cut that off so that it didn't fall down onto the fence between our yard and the neighbor's yard. So since this was already dying, now the tissue down into the rest of this is starting to die off. And this type of joint here would normally be pretty strong, but this one over here is much weaker, and as that decays, that has a risk of splitting off of there and falling over to our other neighbor's house. So then we have this branch going up here, and if you can see, there is kind of a split crack that is running up the side, and I don't know how deep that goes, but you can see that the lower branches off from that are already dying. So we've pretty much determined that this tree is a very high risk to everything around it, and we should probably cut it down before it causes any severe damage or hurts someone. The good news is that this other tree is in good shape, and we can probably keep it. The joint structure is much stronger here, and it probably just needs some pruning and maintenance. It's still creating a lot of shade down here into the food forest, but we will be gaining a lot more sunlight over that way when we remove that tree, so we can grow quite a few things, even more vegetables over in that area. So that's okay to hang on to this, and I'm happy to have this for now because it is still creating habitat for birds and providing us with autumn leaves for mulch and compost. But if we do eventually need to remove this tree, then we will definitely plant something else back here to provide these same functions. So removing this tree would give us a lot more sunlight over here. We would also get a massive resupply of wood chips and firewood and compost material and plenty of logs to use for landscaping and making hugel mounds. That's something that I've been wanting to try for quite a while now. We could find some clever ways to sequester water to help irrigate the garden naturally. We will need to get more sunlight for these two peach trees when they start producing fruit, but that won't be for at least another 2 years, so that gives us some time to get the work done on these silver maples. And the extra sunlight that we gain from removing this tree would be perfect for growing more fruits and berries. One more thing I wanted to note about garden location is regarding utility lines. So power, natural gas, water, all that stuff. So most of our utilities are buried underground. They do this in some areas. So ours all run diagonally back to the corner of the property. So that's partly why we set up the garden here. And when we wanted to expand it a few years later, we built this raised bed way over here to try to avoid having anything right over those utility lines. But we grew things in this for a couple of years. It turned out to not be a very good location right next to the deck, so now it's a not so attractive compost pile. For a while I wasn't sure about growing anything in this area, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized smaller herbaceous plants and flowers would probably be okay. Any larger trees or shrubs with deeper root systems would have to go elsewhere because their roots could potentially damage the utility lines. So we put the lilac bush over here, peach trees over there, but as I said, that area might not provide enough sunlight for them, so that's why it's so appealing to potentially have the north end of the yard to grow more food, because we don't have any buried utilities over there. We would have complete freedom to design it however we want, and we would get a lot more sunlight. So everyone's yard is different, but I hope this gives you some things to think about when you're planning your own food forest or any type of garden. So we may be a little short on sun right now, but we are still able to grow a decent amount of food every year. So at least there's that, even if the conditions are not yet ideal for the biggest harvest. So thank you very much for watching. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, you can hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to stay up to date on my new videos. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you next time.